Shh, behave yourself. All right, my name is Gary Hopper, representative from the big city of Ware.
Where?
And Victoria Sullivan is guest hosting with me tonight. The representative from the big, what ward are you? Manchester, what ward?
I am Ward 9.
Ward 9. Because Eric Eastman's making money tonight. Anyway.
It is my honor to sit in for
Sure,
the Honorable
his hair is
Eric
longer
Eastman.
than yours, too.
His hair is longer than mine.
Oh gosh, this is gonna be the longest hour of your life, Steve.
No,
Anyway,
I'm looking forward to it.
our guest is Steve Negron. It's your first term as a legislator.
Yes, sir.
And now you're running for Congress in the
Yes.
second CD,
That is true.
which I hate that term because nobody knows what it means.
Well, it thinks it's like, we had 45s when we were growing up, the
Right,
A side and the B
CD,
side.
right?
CD2 is the second
You say
side
second
of a CD.
You think it's like the other side of the CD or something, What
Yeah.
is that?
So it's congressional district.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you're
That's why
One
you have
and two.
Victoria.
1 and 2.
That's why
Right.
I'm
That's
there.
why you
The other thing that really bothered me yesterday, I heard that you won, there was down in Nashua, you was a straw poll.
It was actually here. It was right
Manchester?
on Manchester.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you won a straw poll. What
I did.
bothers me is that like, do they use plastic straws or do they actually use real straw?
Well, it
How do
depends.
they-
It's the
what
kind that have that
straw-
extension on them, right? So you're lucky enough to get the longer ones.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, it was pretty interesting to see that, and you had to blow them into the barrel. So that was
So,
kinda cool.
so the candidates sit around with
That's right.
straws and blow
Yeah.
like
I am
spitballs.
Yeah,
not,
and
I
I
am
won
not
that.
needed tonight. I can already tell. Just let you two riff for a while. So that was the New Hampshire Federation of Republican Women.
Yes, ma'am.
Held the Lilac Luncheon that
Yep.
they have.
Which I call the
once a
Blue
year.
Bonnet Brunch because I can't remember Lilac Luncheon, so I've renamed it.
How can you
to the
not
Blue Bonnet
remember the
Brunch.
lilac luncheon?
I
when you
don't
said
know,
it?
but Jenny Notter, she
Yeah,
was
but you
telling me
just
about
said
it.
it.
I know, but
How is Blue Bonnet easier than
Yeah,
Lilac Luncheon?
exactly.
I don't know, it just rolls.
All right,
Blue.
so you'll never forget.
Yes.
The lilac is the official flower of the state of
New
New
Hampshire.
Hampshire.
I know, and the Blue Bonnet is the official flower of the state of Texas.
But
Right,
you
so
don't live
see?
in Texas.
I know.
So you need to get on the lilac train.
Okay. Anyway, it is it was the Lilac Luncheon.
Lilac
Yes,
luncheon.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an annual event.
it was. Yeah.
It's annual?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know. I don't think
Probably
I've
had
ever done that.
115, 120 people. There was a phenomenal event. Great speaker that came down.
Yeah,
from
she
DC,
was great.
from DC, excuse me. And it was a very good time.
That's up from DC.
I know. I was
It's
corrected about that Monday
yeah,
as well.
Exactly. You know why they call it Down East Maine?
No.
This is really cool. And I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. Right? Down East Maine. They call it Down East Maine.
I love the trivia, but with
Yeah.
the preface. It might not be right.
And I don't know. I've never
The
looked
disclaimer.
into it. It made sense, so I just said, okay, it sounds good. And it's not something that's relevant enough to even look up. So they call it Down East Maine because that was prevailing. The winds came off the coast, from inland off the
Right.
coast, so it was basically downwind all the way to Maine. So that's why it's called Down East Maine.
Oh.
So
I'd
sailing
put that away in my plethora of useless information.
Yes, and then you might want to look it up because it's probably incorrect.
But you know what? It's coming from you, Gary, so it's
Yeah.
true. Right.
It's
Yes.
plausible.
It is plausible.
Representative Harper said that. So
That's
it
right,
has to
so
be
it
the
must be
case.
so.
It must be so. So anyway, before we get off into silliness too much,
Yes.
why do you want to run for Congress?
I never really was involved in politics at all. It just started actually when we hosted Carly Fiorina at our house
Okay.
early on in 2016.
She's pretty sharp lady.
She's
huh?
very sharp. And it was really funny. That came about where a friend of mine, we hosted her on a Thursday. A friend of mine called me on a Tuesday. He goes, I'll see you at your house on Thursday. I'm like, well, why are you going to come to my house? He goes, well, there's free beer. I had no idea what he was talking about. At that point in time, I really wasn't involved, but my wife had offered up our house. I didn't know about
So
it.
your wife did this behind your back.
Well, she would tell you no, and she will tell you that she told me. But if I knew that a potential presidential candidate was coming to my house, I figured a lot of things. That's probably one I wouldn't have.
Right.
So
And
she.
she's a lovely lady.
Thank you very much.
As the only woman at the table, I will say that I often tell my husband things that he does not remember. So I'm in her corner. I think she
You
told
see that? All right. So why did we invite her again?
Wait.
to keep you guys honest.
Okay, wait a sec. Yeah, she's probably
The
right.
green button once.
Yes, dear. Hello, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. What's up? I like talking to you, too. So, anyway,
So there.
Really press the green button once?
I did.
Because
Well-
he's still on the line.
All right, I might try again. I'm incompetent. Hello?
All right, now hold on.
That didn't work either. You're fired.
Me?
Yeah, you.
I'm not the one who doesn't know how to work a phone.
It said press the green button once.
All right, he's gone now. I'll let you know when he's back on the phone.
Yeah, this better be this. I don't like that conversation. Yeah,
I'm telling you, these phones are the devil.
No, you're.
I jinxed it.
No, it wasn't you. So
Okay.
she's right. My wife tells me stuff all the time, and it's like she's sitting there. I'm looking right at her. I have no idea what she says.
Carrie, we can never give in.
I
We
don't-
can't. We need to stay strong.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry.
don't give in.
Okay.
Just so you know, we know.
I know you do.
We know.
But it's
So anyway,
so she came to the house.
blindsided you.
She did, which to this day she says that I
Got
know.
her
And
back.
so now I've acquiesced and said,
Right.
of course you did.
Yes, dear. You
Yes,
say
dear.
Yes, dear. Right.
And
yeah.
you know, I just saw, and after getting, and that was really the impetus for me to run for the state house.
Okay.
And once I got into the state house and saw, really, and I know people think I'm crazy, how much fun it is. It to me it was a lot of fun. And the thing that impressed me the most was sitting on the election law committee and having people drive 2 hours to have 5 minutes of your time because they think they make a difference. And that's what it's about.
You want to
right?
rephrase that?
They believe they make a difference.
They
Or
believe
to make a difference would sound better.
to make a difference. They do.
Right. I realize that.
But I think
you
he
see with the
means
phrasing?
because, yes, but I think you mean because they believe they have a voice in this
Absolutely.
legislature. So they take
They
the time
believe-
to come out
that's
and
right.
voice that.
Right.
But
I
that's
got it.
remember that she's a woman.
I'm kind of a referee.
She likes
I
that.
guess.
So
yeah. It's good to have that.
So and in talking to other people about CD2, you know, we've had a 3-term incumbent that in our campaign we don't call her Annie, it's Ann.
So is this going to be Custer's last stand?
You know, we bantered that about. We're not going to take any pride of authorship. We're not going to use that. You know, because somebody will
I
come after
already
me
did.
and say
I just did.
it's K versus C. You know, and
Right.
they're like it's incorrect. It's Native American.
Like KC and
Don't
the
be
Sunshine
insensitive.
Band.
Now that one I like.
So anyway, so you liked being in the
I
state
did,
house.
and I know that, and then talking even just in Nashville, that people said, you know, we have no voice in our federal delegation, and the thing that really kind of woke me up is that when we won in 16, right, we took the corner office, executive council, the state, and the Senate, or the House and the Senate, but our entire federal delegation was Democrat,
Right.
and it just, you know, you shake your head, is like, how does that happen in the Granite State? And it was really obvious to me is that we as Republicans, you know, we need to take, and I don't use this term as anything as being disingenuous, but we need to take the fight to them. We cannot be afraid anymore. We have to be able to have conviction on what we believe in, and I don't think we've done that over the last couple, 2 or 3
never
elections.
do. We
But we
never
have
do.
to.
Because the
We're
thing-
afraid, and I don't know why.
That's actually one thing I wanted to talk to you about.
Yes.
And I don't know you well enough to know this, but I am sick of cowards running for office. I am sick of people who they're presented with a problem, you know, like the shootings and stuff like that in
Right.
schools.
Right.
It's a horrible thing.
It is.
But their first reaction is, you know, to back off, not say anything, don't do anything, and they shouldn't. It should be an all-out assault against the problem, which
Right.
isn't guns.
Absolutely right.
So there was an op-ed in the Seacoast Online by a principal. Did you read that?
I didn't.
Either one of you?
No.
So he went off and he said that the headline was he gave Governor Sununu an F for safety in schools. And he went on this dissertation about, you know, his first bill was the concealed carry bill and all these other things. So Governor Sununu actually responded with he's created a committee to look at school safety
Right.
and these other things, and we've got, you know, other things happening. But he went on to say, if you think that it's guns, like, you're not looking at the big picture. And here's the thing. In the op-ed, this principal said that when he was in Rochester serving as principal, that he put on a bulletproof vest, walked through the school with armed officers, cleared rooms under desks and in closets. So Keith Hansen, who has a radio show, looked into this. Come to find out, the incident that was called at Rochester happened at 4:00 in the afternoon.
Kids were gone.
Kids were gone.
Right.
So they're lying just to make their point, to make things look so much
Well, they do that
worse.
all the time.
But let me ask you something.
Yes, ma'am.
It's budget season
Yes.
around our state.
Right.
And when we're hearing cries for more counselors and more teachers, is anybody calling out for more school security? Is anybody taking their budget and making sure that there is a resource officer in every single
No, of course
school?
not.
No,
No.
they're not. So this falls on the schools and their budgeting system and what they're doing. And Rep. Alschiller, who she and I are just good,
Little Debbie.
good pals, right? She put on Twitter that it's she's watching her son go off to school, him and his friends, and
Oh.
and just thinking that they could be mowed down. Well, if you as a parent honestly believe that your child is going to be mowed down in school and you send them anyway, that is now on you.
Absolutely.
That is
Right.
neglect.
Yeah,
Right.
the thing is what we need people in Congress that will actually stand up. Like if you saw when President Trump got elected, love him or hate him, the first thing the Republicans in Congress did was back down.
Right.
Because they thought the Russian collusion thing was going to gain traction, and he was going to be gone in 3 months. So they just distanced themselves.
Right.
They have no courage. They have no vertebrae. It's like they get elected, and all they care about is staying in office.
Right.
That's exactly
And they
right.
say nothing. They do nothing,
Right.
and they get along. And it's so cotton picking,
So
aggravating.
with this principal pointing his finger at the governor about his lack of whatever, nothing that he has proposed or anybody has proposed would have stopped any one of these shootings.
Right.
Not, I mean, they want more gun laws. The kid in Santa Fe stole the guns from his father. That was illegal. He could not possess those legally. So now what? Right?
Kid in Santa Fe had bombs too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's happened in several of these cases, but they don't report that as much,
Right.
right? But in Florida, there was a complete meltdown of every safety net that was put in place to keep this kid from ever purchasing a firearm. And the police, the school, everyone around him, the social workers, every adult around him dropped the ball.
Right.
And that is why he purchased a firearm. Those laws and those safety nets and those precautions were in place. Nobody upheld the law.
That's true. And the issue to me is bigger. I mean, and I'm a father of three. And nobody ever wants a situation where you would lose a child. I mean, nobody.
No.
And they're very
Right.
disingenuous if they look at us and say, we don't care about that. Of course we care.
Right.
But that's just, it's just an argument point. To me, it's bigger than this, right? To me, it's their ability to take this as an opportunity to attack their very foundational document, which is the Bill of Rights. That's really what they want to do.
Yeah.
And they're using this as leverage. They're starting with the second. They'll go after the first. There'll be other ones that'll come out. And so when I talk to people, I say, look, we had the founding fathers of New Hampshire that refused to ratify the Constitution unless it contained the Bill of Rights. And the first time we back down, the first time that we acquiesce to this, it's going to be the chink in the armor, and then we're done.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So we have to be able to be stalwarts of defenders of the Bill of Rights, clearly, all 10 of them, and the Constitution, and be smart enough to know that that's part of what their MO is, or their modus operandi is, to try to get us into that kind of engage in a debate about a gun when a debate is bigger than that.
It's
Right?
much bigger.
It is much
so
bigger.
My dad would talk about how he went to school with a rifle.
Yeah.
And my brother, they lived in Vermont, same thing, because they would go hunting with their friends after
Absolutely.
school. There weren't school shootings,
Absolutely.
and kids had guns in their hands.
Oh, yeah.
What changed?
You know what? Well, that's a big.
I mean, there's a lot of things, right? The
Absolutely.
family is not
Absolutely.
valued.
The
Life
societal
is not
issue.
valued.
Right. That's right.
These kids don't have discipline anymore, and
Right.
part of that goes back to the parents, but part of that goes back to the school. I know kids that live in the principal's office, and I talk to the parents who have no idea that they've been called in there. The other thing is parents have been removed. So if my child is somewhere where there's an adult that knows
Right.
them and they're misbehaving, they're straightened out by the other adult,
Roger that.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You remove the parents from the school,
Right.
you don't have that second
Right.
recourse for your kids,
Right.
right?
Right.
Kind of shove them back
Absolutely.
into line.
Well,
I grew up in a small town. I mean, I remember when I was 16 years old, I walked down the street and I held my boyfriend's hand at 16. By the time I got home, my
Your
dad
dad knew
knew. I was in trouble.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
How dare you?
It didn't happen
geez,
again.
you
Yeah.
should be ashamed.
Right. But Gary, to your point, I think what you see in Washington is that people get intoxicated and enamored about the trappings of Washington. When I talk to people, I say, look, the thing that defines Steve Negron is the fact that I'm a father, that I'm a husband, that I'm a God-fearing man, that I'm a small business owner. Those are the things that will outlast any political activity that I have. So I better make sure that I get that right.
And you've donated an incredible amount of time to your community.
I do.
Your church and
my church and
Scouts.
scouts and everything, because being the dependent of a military guy, we were nomads all the time, and
Yeah.
which was a great way of growing up in the 60s and 70s. Right, we weren't we didn't have access to the kind of information that children have today. So kids at their age, at 10, 11, 12, are so much more aware than I was when I was 10, 11, 12. But in moving all over the world, I never had a house. I never had a home. We lived on base housing all the time.
Right.
So when my wife and I got married and moved here, I always wanted a house that was mine. Now, she's from Philadelphia and grew up in the same house. It's still there, right?
Yeah.
And so we wanted that ability to have roots.
Yeah.
And I never really knew how important that was, and I think it's even more so today.
Yes.
That the kids, I have a good friend of mine that says, a family's like an oak tree, right? And oak trees get big, and you can go out to the farthest limb and the farthest leaf, but it's still connected.
Right.
It's when you cut the limb, and people do that, and it falls to the ground. It's all by itself.
Well, the thing is, if you look back, what's happened since I took my gun on the bus to go to the shooting team, is in the '60s, it was people's focus was on the family.
Right.
If people were married, they stayed married for the kids, okay? Because the primary thing was you were responsible. You have a fundamental responsibility to do what's right first.
Right.
Absolute right first. So the absolute right thing to do is to stay with those kids until they were old enough to go on their own.
Right.
After that, well, whatever. But people stayed married, and if and like when I was growing up, I knew like one family or something that was divorced. Okay. Because the object was that you was responsibility to your family and to your kids. Yeah. It changed in the 70s where the responsibility was on self-happiness, was on self. And once it changed from responsibility to do the right thing to responsibility to be happy with oneself, the whole deck of cards started falling.
Yeah.
And if you look at Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Washington, D.C. is a good example. Washington, D.C. in 1965, only 25% of those kids were brought up in broken homes. By the year 2000 in Washington, D.C., 75% of the children were living in single-parent and broken homes.
Well, and I'll tell you what has contributed to that too is the welfare system that we have, because
It
now it's a
encourages
it's a generational welfare system. They're encouraged to have babies out of wedlock.
Yep.
I mean, do you know girls that have several children with several dads? Because I do, and they've never lived under the same roof with them. And so that kind of that they're not dependent on each other to be a family. They're dependent on the government, and they're taught that that's okay.
Yep.
So, and we're making that happen. Like, we all have a hand in this. We're all responsible for what's happened.
But once you change from being responsible or doing the right thing to doing what's best for me, that the whole thing
Well, no, because no one's concentrating on what's best for the kids.
Right,
And that
exactly.
used to be, I mean, so not every marriage is great. And I know people that stayed together for their children. And often, once the children are grown, they reconnect because they don't have all the stress,
There's less
right?
conflict all of a sudden. Yeah.
They stayed through it long enough that they were able to find each other again. But it's supposed to, children don't come by accident. You plan to have a family, or sometimes they come by accident, but they don't come here on their own. Like, you are part of creating them. So you have a responsibility to them and to their happiness and to their care. And that is on you because that's what you did. That's your responsibility.
And back to your point, Gary, people that they waffle in the wind, and people that don't have conviction, people don't have a moral compass, right, can easily be swayed with whatever the prevailing wind is.
Yep.
And that's what you see a lot of times, because what I've seen is that people want to then stay in Washington because, unfortunately, that now defines them.
Right.
If I'm not a congressperson or if I'm not a senator, now what am I?
We're seeing it in our party. Like, we have very specific platform issues. We have things that we believe in, like a traditional family. And we're seeing this, like the bathroom bill, right? People are waiting for the governor to sign it, which is going to be horrible for me as a woman and for people that are going to feel like their privacy is now intruded upon by it can be anybody. We've always shared bathrooms with transgender people. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But now any man can be in the bathroom, just say that he's transgender that day. There's no proof. He doesn't have to look. He doesn't have to have gone through any surgeries. And now he has more rights to be there than I do.
Right.
Right. In fact, if you say anything, it's probably going to be a hate crime.
And it removes the ability for whoever owns the establishment to take care of that. It's
Right.
also going to remove the ability for school administrators to handle this on a case-by-case basis. So what if the person doesn't want to be in the boys? What if a transgender boy doesn't want to be with the boys? Now, does he have to be? Because that's the law. The law says he has to go by what gender it should have been handled on a case-by-case
Absolutely.
basis. No one should be discriminated against for any reason.
But we had laws
We
on the
had
books for
laws
that.
that
That's
already
right.
covered that.
Right.
And now this, I think there's so much talk about this that if the governor signs this bill, it's going to be detrimental for the party in general because there are so many unintended consequences. This isn't about supporting the gay community because I think a lot of us have friends and support the gay community. This is a much bigger picture. And I think
Well,
we've
I think
lost
it's-
our way as far as our principles and our convictions.
Yeah, the party's lost its way because the person at the head of the ticket in New Hampshire is, I think he's political.
Well, and look at
He votes for things based entirely on whether it's going to help or not help him stay in office.
But then he's not seeing the big picture because I will tell you that the reason, I firmly believe, the reason that we finally have a Republican in office, look at the Trump train that came out to
Right.
vote, right? Who is completely against this kind of thing.
Right.
Frank Edelblue is a true conservative.
Right.
Through and through. Solid Christian
Right.
man. And his conservative base came out to support him for governor. He missed it by a hair.
sure.
He threw his support behind Governor Sununu. People that wouldn't have voted for him normally voted for him because Frank threw his support behind him. If he lets down that conservative base, we're
very
not
difficult.
getting reelected.
Right.
You're not getting
Right.
elected. Like they're just not going to come out.
Right.
They're not going to come out and vote.
Yeah, well, why would you? If you're gonna, if you vote for Republicans because you believe in a fundamental conservative platform that
Right.
they're theoretically support, they get into office and then ignore it. Why would you be motivated to go vote?
And I think they underestimate how many of us there are.
Well, the thing is, if you look at a lot of the
That's true.
previous elections, the reason Republicans don't win is not because there's more Democrats voting. It's because there's more Republicans staying home.
Exactly.
Right.
And,
And
that's
I
the
think
point.
what we've seen with President Trump is that, he has rallied and he has struck a chord
Yep.
with people that, nobody gave him a chance. Nobody gave him a chance when there were 16 running in the primary.
Right.
Right. They were like, okay, he's going to drop out. He's going to do something. There's going to be some bomb. But, he isn't somebody that we always looked for in a president. He doesn't have, but
Yeah.
maybe, he has shown us something that, all these polished politicians, right, that know what to say and always on cue, right, and you never know really what they stand or what they believe in. He has blown that up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just are not able or equipped to handle that right now. But as I was talking this morning at the Center
the
Right
hate
meeting,
from the left toward him
It's-
is unprecedented.
It is.
It's I don't know if you felt
Yeah.
it, but me on Twitter, I mean, this whole thing just came out with Twitter. I'm sure that they'll appeal it, but the judge said that he can't block people on Twitter.
All right.
I have blocked people on Twitter because they are abusive to me. Like they called me the C word. Like they've been completely abusive to me. These Democrats, mostly men, some women, and I've blocked them because why shouldn't I be able to have a conversation on Twitter with people who
Absolutely.
are
Are
my
like-minded. Yeah.
constituents
Yeah.
and who I want to have conversations,
Right.
even people that aren't necessarily like-minded,
Right.
but have a respectful
Sure.
conversation, right? Why do we have to be interrupted by someone who's just blatantly
Well, the
ignorant
thing-
and hateful and wants to just interrupt the conversation to
And be
just
disruptive,
obstruct?
right.
That's
Right.
it.
Have you ever heard the story of Candace Owen?
Yes, I follow her on Twitter.
Okay,
I
so-
love Candace Owen.
So, to make it short, because we're actually here to talk about Steve, but
well, this is all about Steve, isn't it?
kind of. So
I didn't get that memo.
So
Yeah.
Candace Owen, if you if you watch her video, Red Pill Black, she's a young black woman who wanted to have a startup to try to find out who's doing this bullying, who's actually doing it. So she created a startup on what's that GoFundMe type thing,
Right.
and a lady that was in charge of bullying at Twitter called her and said, pull down your GoFundMe thing. She goes, well, why would I do that? She said, because if you don't, all those people that support Trump and all those racists will attack you. And the woman was crying and stuff like this, woman for Twitter. And Candace Owens pretty young, but she's really sharp. And she goes, that doesn't make sense. Why would somebody that is obviously working at Twitter trying to keep people from bullying not want to find out who's actually responsible for the bullying? And she says, no, I'm not going to do that because it was just illogical. And so within like an hour, she starts getting attacked. And she was getting attacked calling her the N-word. And the names, she says the names were so obvious because it was, Trump 2016, or, the handles were all,
Right.
Something about white people or Trump. And they were all attacking her, calling her the N-word, and we're going to kill you, we're going to kill your family, and all this other crap. It was like hundreds of thousands of things on Twitter attacking her. And it just like the light went off. She goes, holy crap, the people that the bullies on Twitter are the Democrats, are the liberals.
Yep.
And then she started, that's how she became famous, because she outed them.
Right.
So these are the people that are actually doing it. There's not a huge Nazi party that's actually attacking liberals. It's actually the liberals themselves attacking liberals, or anybody else that doesn't
Right.
hold the party line.
And it's gone visceral. I mean, it becomes. I mean, you can't have.
Ray Buckley, the head of the Democrat Party here in New Hampshire, he's a horrific human being. He has said awful things about me on Twitter. And he went after Lisa Freeman. He said something about her wardrobe, and she wears trash bags, Representative Freeman. And he's just a really nasty person. And he doesn't care that we're women. It's not about, we're the party of women. They hate conservative
Right.
women. The liberal men attack me more than anybody else. The things they've said. The person that called me a C, he's in my ward. He's a Democrat. And after that, he ran for selectman and he won. This is what we're dealing with on a daily basis, the amount of hate that is coming at us. So to say that you can't decide who you want to have a conversation with on Twitter, I don't think that this is going to hold up, because it's your account, right? You're using a service. If that service can't protect you, right, you shouldn't have to just let yourself be out there to be abused by these people. This isn't normal conversation.
No.
And I think the way we change some of that dialogue is that, we continue to do the things that and have these successes with the president. But the fact of the matter is he needs help.
Yeah.
The president needs help in Congress, right? I mean, not only is he fighting the Democrats, he's fighting some of his people in his own party.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's what's aggravating.
It is aggravating. So, we need to find and send strong conservatives that are willing to stand up and be accountable,
Right.
And so what if we get mud thrown on us? That's part of the deal, right? But if you stand up and you have a moral conviction about a party plank, then it will sustain and it will outlast. People get tired, they just get run down, and they'll just eventually go away. They will.
Right.
But we don't have that right now. Like I was talking to the governor, he can't pick up the phone and call Washington for help for our state. He can't do it, right? Because he's got to go down for himself, because none of the four that are down there are going to help him at all with this
And
agenda.
then when he does go down there, Ray Buckley attacks him for leaving the state.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though Maggie
Right.
Hassan was, traveling
That's
abroad
right.
all the time.
That's right.
But so we've got a bill in that's supposed to, part of the reason that our delegation in D.C. is what it is because our universities have college students that don't live here, that vote here. No, seriously, I was with Frank Gintis' campaign. We were waiting for the results, and the whispers came down. The numbers came in from Durham. We lost, right?
Right.
So that's where these numbers are coming from that are tanking us. They don't represent us in D.C. because they're representing the college students. So we've got a bill that's going. I think one of them died,
Right,
and
did.
one of
Yep.
them is still going. So one is being sent to the Supreme Court by the governor,
Right. For
validation,
like an opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, to
Yep.
make sure that it's constitutional. So when someone is a student and they say, I go home for break, home is where they should vote.
Yeah.
Like, it's an absentee ballot. It
Right.
doesn't. It takes you 5 minutes.
You were in the service,
I
right?
was,
Okay,
yes.
so when you were in the service,
Yes.
where did you vote?
Well, my home state was Texas. That was always my home of record, no matter where I went, whether I lived in California,
So when you
Colorado.
were- so
I did
you
an
were
absentee
stationed-
ballot.
when
How
you-
did you figure that out?
Well, I have opposing thumbs. It's not hard.
And you
not
probably
hard.
didn't have the form online
It's not hard.
like they do
No,
now.
no. But in all fairness, we had what was called a voting officer, right? And we got time, and he said, "Okay, who's where you from? I need to
Eddie's
get,
on line 1.
I need to get a." Go ahead. Yeah.
Eddie,
Wait.
we're gonna try this.
We're going to try this, so let's see what happens. Hello, Eddie?
Eddie.
Eddie? Eddie!
Hey.
Hey, we did it. How are you?
Technical breakthrough.
Good.
Is this Eddie, our newest member of the New Hampshire GOP, Eddie?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Oh.
Mr. Ed Sapienza.
So what ore do you want to stick in the water?
I'm Ward 8.
No, ore. What do you want to talk about?
Oh. Okay. All right. Listen, I want to talk to the panel here. I don't know if your guest is a state rep or not.
Yeah,
He
yes,
is.
yeah.
But, okay, great, because my question has to do with state law, okay? And it has to do with municipal employees' negotiations, okay? Public employee labor unions' negotiations with their employers, be it the state itself or a political subdivision, okay? A city, a town, whatever. Because quite often what we hear is the negotiations are a secret. We can't talk about it any way, shape, or form. It's like a really secret squirrel, okay? It's like the nuclear secrets, okay?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's true. I think it's called a gag order. I think it generally applies to the beginning of the negotiations,
Hey, Eddie?
not the entire process.
Eddie?
Okay?
Hey, Eddie.
Yep.
We're here to talk about Steve Negron's run for Congress. Can you kind of morph that into a question about that?
So, in
Yeah,
Congress, what would
it's
you
in
do
progress,
for
right.
Yeah.
What is this? Because
Transparency.
these matters are covered by state law.
Yeah.
What governs these proceedings.
Right. Right.
We're all on board with that?
Yeah.
So are the negotiations as secret as we're told?
A lot of them are are not covered under right to know. We had a bill in the Judiciary Committee to try to even get, I think, the minutes of those negotiations. We had a bill earlier this year to try to open that up
Right.
a little bit, and that was killed by the House.
Okay, so that bill was killed, all right? But
Yeah.
but what is current law? Does current law say that they have to be as secret as they are?
They don't have to
Or-
be, but they choose to be, and the municipalities and the people and the unions negotiating choose to do it, and you have no right to know what's going on in there.
But why, if it's public money and public contracts, why wouldn't we,
It's the
the
way the law.
public, who are the
I get
employees?
that. I know. I was in committee. I voted to pass, and it went to the full House, and it was killed. So that's
Eddie-
the way it is.
Okay,
We have to look into that, and if I get reelected, you and I have to craft some legislation that takes care of that.
Yeah.
How's that?
But right
okay.
now,
Gary, is
yeah.
it
Go ahead.
accurate to say that it's the two sides decide the rules of the table at the beginning? And if it's going to be so secret, it's only because they make it secret? In other words, they don't have to do it.
I don't believe they have to, but I think that's part of the negotiations, and I believe the unions.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, they don't have to, even if they're telling us it's such a secret, right? It's really a super secret. Even under current law, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Eddie,
Right.
I'm going to cut you off because we're talking about to Steve, but basically, as the law is now, okay, the only way you can have access to that information is sending it to Hillary's private server, and then hope the Russians expose
All right.
it later. All right, buddy?
All right.
All right, have a good
Thanks,
night.
Ed.
Law. Thank you.
Right? Am I
as
right?
I know.
I think I'm right.
I think that's a great question, though, that he asked, because this comes up a lot. It's public money, so therefore, and I know that public employees hate this when you say we're the employers,
Right.
but we are. So all of that information should be public.
I agree. That's why I voted
The
for it.
negotiations
By
should be
jingle.
public.
Yeah.
Why are they behind closed doors?
That's not the okay. So the argument against, I don't want to get too far off on this, but
And is this part of the New Hampshire Municipal Association? Is this part of their?
this was in judiciary. No, the reason is the unions and the municipal association both believe that the only way to have a legitimate discussion and barter and have some horse trading is in a private setting, because if it's a public setting, then it's a grandstanding and, politician A saying, "Oh, look, I'm tough. I was tough against the unions," and it gets into this urinating contest. And so their argument is that's what will happen if it's public. If it's private, they can actually have some serious horse trading. I don't buy it. I think it's public money, and it should be.
Yeah.
I think it should be on TV as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so maybe we can work
But-
on that together
But
next year.
we'll check what the vote was, because I don't think we even have close to the votes to override the
We'll see who
committee
comes in
report.
next year.
That's right.
We're losing your vote,
Yeah, see, you big jerk.
I'm sorry.
but hopefully we find a way to get you in there. But it's really, I think a lot of it's going to depend on, for you and any Republican running for a DC spot, is going to depend on if we get this legislation through and we can protect the New Hampshire vote, because that's really what it's about.
When I've traveled the state, one of the things that I've found is that there's this we've coined it as this great national insecurity. There's a lot of things that are keeping these people up, and they're looking for an answer. They want somebody that they can believe in to say, okay, you know what, I'm behind you. We saw that with President Trump. Maybe not so much here in New Hampshire, where he had some other bigger wins. But it is like, it's what we do every Sunday when we balance our checkbook. It's things like the national debt that bothers them. It's like immigration. It's like what's going on with North Korea, what's going on with the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that keep them up at night. And so, our message is, we understand those, and we believe we have a way about addressing those and going down and taking care of them.
I'll tell you something else that needs to be taken care of. And this is, I haven't heard anybody talking about this. As soon as President Trump took office, the Democrats were tweaking out because he was signing executive orders.
Absolutely.
Right? You and I know that those executive orders were repealing Obama executive
Yeah.
orders.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we get that, right?
Right.
If you get in when you get into Congress,
Right.
it'd be really cool if you start looking at those executive orders and trying to write what he did into law, so that isn't an option if the presidency flips sides.
Right.
They should be
Right.
able to tank the economy.
Right. Absolutely. Just like DACA. DACA was an EO. It was an executive order.
Right.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that the previous administration did that's exactly what President Trump has done, is trying to just right the ship.
Right.
That's what he's trying. And he's getting hit from all sides about, the same. He's writing as many EOs as his predecessor. But yeah, he's in my opinion, he's righting a wrong that was done previous to his taking over the administration.
Yeah, and I'd like to see also
What?
He had an epiphany. Yes, I'm on.
constitutional carry nationwide.
Absolutely. Reciprocity across all 50.
Right.
You bet. Absolutely.
Do you know where that stands in the Congress right now?
I don't. It's really funny when they go to recess. And that's one of the things that I've tried to understand. I mean, we have a pretty good idea what happens in our house. And look, they only have 35 more members than we do. So
Right.
I've had
Right.
my training wheels. So, but they're not as fun and good looking as you guys are. So
Right.
that's
Obviously,
okay. I understand. I had to say that. But how do we?
That's just really true.
That is true. All right, you can take a bow. It's how do you work with those kind of groups? And I think that being in the House is going to give me a great opportunity and a lot of kind of like playing in the sandbox before actually going out into the real field. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of on-the-job training in
A
New
lot.
Hampshire
Oh,
House
yeah,
of Representatives.
absolutely.
So
It
you were
is.
just thrown in there.
Into election law, which was crazy.
I was sort of private messaging someone that might be interested in running, and I said, I'm going to tell you what no one told me. It is not a part-time job.
Oh, it isn't.
It is not just showing up for session. You've
Right.
got committee 2 or 3 times a week in the
Yeah.
beginning,
Yep.
and then your sessions kick in, and sometimes you're locked in, and you actually need an escort
You sometimes
to
you're
the
3 and 4
bathroom.
days a day. Oh yeah.
That is because you're a newbie.
No.
No, because if you go down the back stairs and you
That's
go out
true.
through the tunnel, you can get out the other side.
That is true. I recently learned about the back stairs.
You see? Do you see this,
In my
this look of
4th year, I
bewilderment?
learned about the back stairs.
So I'm telling you, you gotta, it takes a
Yeah,
seasoned
but there was a
legislator
night where
to
we
know
were
how
locked
to-
in, and I had to look at the state trooper and say, I need to use the ladies' room. Are you really going to follow me? And he said, no, Representative, I think you're a safe bet. You're coming back.
That's
I'm like, I'm
right.
coming back. So I actually, so
Did you have
people
to,
don't
like,
always.
leave your pocketbook with him as
No,
collateral.
he
or-
trusted
Something
me.
you coming back, yeah.
something that people don't understand is that when they roll call, and sometimes we are in the restroom, we miss a vote.
Right.
So today I missed a vote. I think it's my first one all year because I was actually at the door.
I missed
And the
one-
sergeant
I
of
missed
arms
one on
said,
193.
and he wouldn't let me in. So it was the vote for the, it had multiple things in the bill. Well, a lot of them did today. They were all kind of crafted bills
Right.
that we had today. But it had to do with the death penalty for the teachers.
You don't give teachers death penalties.
Death benefits.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Well,
That's
this is
gonna go
really a live free or die station. That goes to those negotiations we were just talking about.
benefits.
Whether or not there's a
Oh,
death
my
penalty
brain was
for
trying
teachers.
to think of what else was in the bill.
Death
And I
penalty
think
for teachers. That's
it
good.
might
That's a
have
good
also
idea.
had the money in it for locks for the
Security,
schools
for security
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
and
yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
It wasn't the death penalty though, but there was
No.
something else.
No, it was not.
Um,
At least that's not what I voted
So
for. But
I didn't make it back in time for that vote. So I just want to make it clear I did not take a walk on it. I was
Right.
not trying to avoid the vote.
right,
Ah.
right.
I just
Well, if
did
you thought it was
these
about the death penalty for teachers, I'd take a walk.
ways. That would not be good.
So,
Yeah,
so this is a tough question. This is
I'm ready.
brutal. Okay,
I'm ready.
So a plane of Americans and Canadians crashes on the border. Where do they bury the survivors?
Well, that I've thought about that a lot
See?
lately. So
Like the
the
death
fact that they're
penalty.
survivors means that there's no fatalities.
Oh,
So you don't bury
It's not good to
survivors.
bury alive people.
Well, some people do.
well,
The
yeah.
teachers and
depends on
death
what country.
penalties.
The teachers, yeah.
I am never living
Yeah.
this down. This is going.
Please,
This is never
this has
going
got to go
away.
viral. Victoria wants to have death penalty
I
for
love
teachers.
teachers.
No.
Just so you know, you should protect teachers.
No, we should absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And the gallows, you mean?
But the
No.
death penalty is another bill that's up. It's
But
that's
not-
another
not-
one that's on the governor's desk.
Yes.
But
it
that's
is.
not for teachers.
So what do you think
No.
about that one?
Me?
No, I'm trying to get off the. I'm trying to
Yeah,
get.
I know,
I'm
you're trying
trying
to- It's
so
okay.
hard
No,
to
no,
swim
no, no.
away.
I get it. I get it.
Get off the jokes.
So I will tell you that was one of my toughest votes, and I'm trying so hard.
That's such jokes. I didn't know you were such a jerk.
I
That's pretty
didn't-
Cool. I like that.
I didn't vote until I think I was down to 2 seconds. So we've got the
Oh,
timer,
no,
and
no,
you
no.
get
Yeah.
go down to 30 seconds, from 30 down.
Yeah.
And I was just like, looked at Tiffany who sits beside me. I said, "This is probably the hardest vote this session," and
It's getting easier.
I just
and
don't know
easier
that
for me.
there's ever a right answer
There
for
is
it.
a right answer. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I've had this run-in since I was first in office. When I first got elected in 2000, I was absolutely pro death penalty. Okay? Over time, I've watched. Over time, I've seen attorney generals use deceptions, lie, cheat. I saw the attorney general of the state of New Hampshire advocating for Marcy's Law. And the reason he was advocating for Marcy's Law is it gave him complete immunity from any consequences for bad actions.
Right.
Well, if you have an attorney general that needs immunity, what the heck is he doing?
And we saw in, I think, New York. Was it New York? There was a cop that someone just got free because he was in jail for 17 years, and they found out that this cop had fabricated
The
evidence
evidence,
against
right.
him.
And
He
the
went to
attorney-
jail when he was like 14, and
Yeah.
he just got out.
Exactly. That the attorney general is the one who decides to prosecute for capital punishment.
And then in Claremont, we just had a cop that he's in a lot of trouble for fabricating
Right.
evidence and doing a lot of things. So I understand. So I end up voting against repealing it, and it was because we had that murder of the woman in out near Amherst. What's that town? It was a few.
Mount Vernon.
Mount
Mount
Vernon.
Vernon. And her daughter was also slashed by
Yeah.
these horrific people who just picked them because that was the house that they
Right.
were at, right? It was just a
Right.
random
Right, right,
act of
right.
horror. And Michael Briggs' family, and I didn't want either one of those families to have to go through another sentencing, and that I just didn't want to put those families through anything else. So if it had been, it started now, I think I would have voted differently.
Right.
But I just didn't want to put those families through anymore.
Yeah, well, if I could trust the attorney general's office, I've seen too much. Then yes, I would
I get
agree
that
with you.
too.
But I do not trust them.
And for me, it was I'm a pro-life guy. And
Right.
so if you, in my opinion, if you're a pro-life, and life for me is from conception to natural
Yeah.
death. And it was a struggle as well, you know, but if I'm going to stand in front of anybody and say that I'm pro-life, then I'm pro-life 100%, right?
Right.
And I don't believe, you know, these heinous crimes that are out there, you know, there shouldn't be any chance of parole at all.
Right.
You know, they shouldn't be let loose back in society. But for me, when I was struggling, I knew that bill was coming up, and I prayed about it. You know, I'm like, you know, and I'm not the one to judge.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as a Catholic and as somebody who teaches at my church, that life to me is sacred. Doesn't mean that I don't have personal feelings. I just don't think the government should be the one to be enacting those kinds of things. And to your point, Gary, you know, we're not infallible. There's only one person who's infallible, and you know, and he believes that, you know, that everybody has the ability to be to have the ability to be, you know, atone for his or her sins. But for me, you know, I did vote for it, but only because I am a pro-life guy through and through. So
Right.
I also struggled because if somebody, you know, came up to me and tried to harm me or my family, I could defend myself. I could take their life
Yeah.
if I had to, right?
absolutely.
I struggle with someone
What if
being
it's a
tied
teacher?
to a table. I struggle with someone being tied to a table and being injected. When you vote for that, you make the decision that somebody else has to do that, right? You're making that decision. So,
That it's not you.
right, but I
Yeah.
still I was legitimately torn, and in the end, I voted against the repeal for the reasons that I stated.
Yeah.
But that was my hardest one this session. I mean, there were harder losses for me.
Yeah,
I think
but the thing
the
is-
viability bill was a
Right.
terrible loss for
But
us.
the
It
thing
is.
is, that's really cool.
What?
That you're torn. It means you're thoughtfully thinking about plus, minus. You're not just going in there and doing whatever the party tells you, or callously voting,
Right.
with the party or against the party or whatever. It's you're thoughtfully thinking about it, and that can get emotional.
That was an emotional
It's just
one.
like
Awesome.
the topic of immigration, right? It's almost religious now, you know, about, you know, whether or not what we should do and stuff. And you know, my grandfather is an immigrant from Mexico. He came from a town called Michoacan and came the right way. You know, and
You guys must have wicked cool food at home.
I love, and I'm married to an Irish woman,
So,
so it is wicked cool.
so it's corn.
You were in so much trouble when you get home tonight.
So it was
if she
corn,
is,
no,
Even hash
if
and
she
what?
is watching tonight, he is in so much trouble. You better first of all eat on the way home.
That's right. I've got to get. Well, I'm
You're
right
a
above
drive-through.
margaritas. Anyway, so
Oh yeah.
so you know,
pretty
it's one. You know, my grandfather came here and he did it the right way.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we're a land of laws, and we need to enforce those laws. And people don't get a head start. People don't get to the front of the line.
We're a land of laws. We're also a land of immigrants
Absolutely.
that had to
Yeah.
do it the right way.
That's right.
And what about these people that are waiting in line and
Absolutely.
they can't come in
Right.
and their circumstances are just as devastating.
That's right.
And they're trying to get
They
here.
will label us, you know, as people that are anti-immigrant, just because we want to enforce the law. And I
Yeah,
will look
and-
at them and say, no, you know, and you know what? You can't say that to me because I'm sitting here with Mexican blood running through my veins. And oh, by the way, my grandmother's from Puerto Rico, and in the 20s, they thought that they were immigrants as well. Heck, some people still think that Puerto Ricans aren't U.S. citizens today. So, you know, I understand the situation. I do. I know that my grandfather did it because it was important to him. But everybody wants to make this thing about citizenship, right? There's 185 ways to come into this country. And to me, it's a national security issue.
Yep.
I want to know who's in my borders. I want to know what their intent is, why you're here, right? Because lacking that, you have chaos. And that's what we're seeing right now.
And when my great grandparents came here from Poland.
Yeah.
My Irish family was here a little bit longer, but they did not.
Polish and Irish?
Yeah, God help my husband.
Did you go to college?
Isn't that Polish? Let it go, Gary.
I got it. I
Okay.
got it.
No, my wife's a Polak, so yeah.
Yeah. You're a very blessed man. The Polish women make great wives.
Pierogies.
Yes, they do.
Pierogies. But they came here with like what they had in hand, right? And they worked and they became something of themselves, and they all worked really hard. I'll tell you, they also did not speak English. I'm sorry, they did not speak Polish outside of the house.
Right.
ever. And that I learned recently because there's a big Polish community here in Manchester, and I went to the church and we were talking about it, and that came from the churches. The churches would say, if you want to be employable, if you want to be considered a citizen, if you want to be respected here, you need to learn how to speak the language.
Right.
So they spoke Polish in the house,
Yep.
but when they were out, they were very proud to be American, and they spoke English.
Well, I got to tell you. So my wife's family are all Polacks, right? So I'm sitting there, and I love ethnic Jews.
I don't think that's politically correct.
No, it's okay.
It's okay. To me, I love ethnicity.
Right.
I hope we don't ever become a complete melting, like homogenous.
Right.
Because I love the differences. I love people that look different, are different, and have different behavior, and I just think it's beautiful.
It is.
God created us all different. It's all cool.
It's a quilt, right?
It's a quilt. But so, and I just think it's awesome. So I'm going to a family party out in I forget, Hadley or something like that, Mass. And I'm sitting next to
That's where all the Polish people live in Massachusetts. We're all in the
wicked, yeah.
western
Really?
part of the state.
super Polish area. So anyway, I'm sitting next to my wife's grandmother. And so I says, this is beautiful, right? I says, so Graham, because I think she was either born in Poland and came here, or was born here just after they got here from Poland, okay? So she should have some historical knowledge. And so I love listening to people that have been through so much. And I says, Graham, so what's the difference? I mean, if you look back at the Irish immigrants, they were persecuted
Yes.
really bad, okay? But you never hear about that with the Polish. You never hear of any persecution of the Polish. And she's serious as a heart attack. She looks at me, says, Gary, the Polish have always been a good, hard-working people. The Irish, well, they drink and they don't like to work.
But
It was just like
The Polish
so
people
great.
actually did have a hard, just like any immigration, like any mass immigration, right?
Right.
So they did have a hard time when they came here, but that's why they went to the churches and they found their support in the churches and they communed. So the western part of the state is Polish because that's where they went to support each other.
You
and
know what
live.
the difference was, really?
What?
It was just great hearing that because she is just so opinionated. She's completely wrong, but it's still funny. The reason is the Irish were not allowed to go to school or do anything in England or in Ireland. The English oppressed them really bad.
The Irish Catholics.
Okay, they were completely oppressed. They were not. They basically, if they lived in mud huts, they were profoundly ignorant,
They were starved.
uneducated, illiterate, and when they came over here, they had no skills. Okay, so they had to start from ground zero all the way up. Whereas the Polish, most of the European countries, if people immigrated from those countries, they were carpenters, they were tradesmen, they had education, and they weren't starting from zero and trying to work up. They had to learn English.
Right.
But like if you look at down in Newport, all those houses are built by Italians.
So the Irish famine, right? That was mostly the Irish Catholics that were starved.
Yeah.
The Protestants still had food. They still had grain. They still
Yeah.
had things like that. So when they came here, we were a Protestant nation then. There weren't
Right.
a lot of Catholics. That's actually where the Blaine Amendment came out of. So when we tried to get SB 193 passed, the school choice bill, and people were saying we don't want to put money into religious schools, all of our schools were Protestant. They had the King James Version of the Bible in the schools.
Oh, yeah.
When the Catholics came here, they didn't want their kids having the King James Version. They wanted the Catholic Bible.
Right.
Parochial schools were started, and the state was paying for the parochial schools as well because they wanted to have their own schools because they weren't being served here. And that's where it came from. So Blaine came in, said, we don't want the Catholics to have any money, so we're going to just say we're not going to have any sect will receive money. Well, they didn't consider Protestant sect because it was
mainstream.
mainstream.
Right.
So that's when the Catholic churches started funding the schools.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
So that's where the discrimination started so
Oh
long
yeah.
ago.
If you look if you look back in the late, even up until I think the late 1800s, you had to be a Protestant to serve in the New Hampshire legislature.
Really?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. You couldn't if you were Catholic or an atheist, you couldn't serve in the legislature.
We're almost out of time, so I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
U.S. Department of Education,
Yes.
stay or go?
Revamped.
I think it should go. Bye-bye. Return all that money to the states.
I think when you look at, you look at all the bills.
Do you think
look
there
at
should be like a death penalty for all the teachers?
Well, that's what I think that Victoria's thinking about.
Right.
There's just going to be like a nuclear option.
Right.
I'm so glad I came here tonight.
Part of the debt that we have is looking at all these agencies and how much are they spending,
Right.
And
Right.
you need to look at, Department of Energy was instituted in the 50s to try to get us off dependency of fossil fuel.
I thought that was under Carter.
No. The DOE was before then.
Okay. Hey, we only
the
got
point
30
is-
seconds.
Yeah,
Steve.
the point is,
What do you want everyone to know about you?
go to www.negron4congress.com. I've got a bunch of video clips about my positions and everything.
Obviously, this won't be one of those.
Negron.
Obviously, this won't be one of those video clips.
I'm going to put it up there,
Yeah,
and I'm going to be on a continuing loop in the bathroom.
Awesome. Just the part where I had that little flib.
Yeah, that's good.
Just that part. That'll be awesome. All right, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Victoria, thank you very much, hon.
It was great being here. Thank you. Thanks, Eric. You got me in all kinds of trouble tonight.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.